Welcome back to our live training session. In this tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at getting your engine to fire up and run and dialing in our idle control. The goal of this tutorial is to have the engine maintaining its own stable idle so that as we're driving, we return back to idle, or we crank over the engine and fire it off, it maintains and holds that stable idle. This is super important. We don't need the engine stalling out constantly. You don't need to have any problems trying to crank and fire over the engine. So we're gonna work through whatever comes in our way here in this tutorial. This is always the first step in doing the actual calibration process. Now we have a couple unknowns that we have to sort out here. We don't know how much our VE table needs to be adjusted by. We don't know what kind of adjustments we need to make within our idle control routine. We have some tables that are gonna be playing a factor in our fueling delivery when we're firing off our engine cold. I haven't fired off my engine yet. So we have our cranking fuel table, we have an after start fuel table, we have a warm-up enrichment table. We have a lot of different factors to kind of sort through to get a stable cranking and idle out of our engine so that we have reliable crank to fire, and then we don't have stalling conditions as we're trying to drive it and do part throttle tuning and wide open throttle tuning. So let's jump in here to the tutorial. Let's talk about where we're at here in terms of our calibration from our base map creation, and then we'll talk about what we have in play in terms of our tables that we have to ignore, so to speak, in the beginning here when we're getting the engine to fire and run, and then we'll unpack some things with our idle control. Then we'll actually go ahead and fire up the engine and start to data log and take a look at that process. So first things first, if we take a look here on our fuel tab or fuel page here, this is the main tuning layout supplied in our training course folder. Now in this specific page, we're looking at our VE table, we're looking at our target lambda table. We're gonna find in this situation that our target lambda table here is based on our throttle position versus engine speed. So we're in an alpha N strategy because we have individual throttle bodies. Now, when we're looking at our idle area here, that's going to be anywhere from 500 to let's say 1300 in this range. We have idle VE values here of approximately 30-35%. These are a little bit lower in terms of our VE values that we would normally expect if we had map pressure as our load input to our table. Because we've selected alpha N, it is not taking a look at the map pressure sensor in terms of our cylinder filling and our VE calculations determine the estimation of air mass. It's actually taking a look at our baro pressure, which is always constant at whatever the elevation you're going to be at. In my case, it's sea level. My baro pressure is approximately 100 kPa. So what we'll find is because baro pressure is fed into our VE calculation, we're going to see that the VE numbers are typically traditionally lower at idle conditions compared to having map pressure as our load input here and factoring in that manifold pressure. So that's one thing to note. Now we don't know what these values need to be at, these VE values. We're going to sort that out. What we're going to be doing is taking a look at what our wideband is reading, comparing that to our target lambda, so our actual lambda to our target, and then watching what's going on with our EGO correction or the closed loop correction. This is going to be telling us how far things are off by and then how much we need to update either our idle area here in our VE values, or if we need to possibly update our injector data. Specifically, if we go here to setup, taking a look here under fueling injectors cal, this is the injector dead time or latency values. We may need to increase or decrease these depending on how far off things are with our VE table, and we'll discuss this as we go through here, but we'll either have a fuel modeling problem or an airflow modeling problem. We're going to try to correct which side of the equation is out of whack once we get the engine to fire and run. So we have our target lambda table here set for idle conditions that we're targeting 1.0 lambda or stoichiometric. This is completely normal to be able to target that there. Even in part throttle, we have 1.0 lambda here at about 3,500, but we're really only focusing on our idle here right now. So we're looking here, 1.0 lambda target. We're going to be sorting out what these VE values need to be at. We're going to be sorting out potentially editing our injector dead time values in here. That's going to be between our air and fuel modeling. Now, we also have a couple other things to factor in here to consider. If we go here to our cranking fuel tab, we're going to find that we have a prime pulse and a cranking fuel table here to deal with. Now, looking at this, the prime pulse is used for the first 1 or 2 cranking revolutions of the engine as we're cranking it over. It gets fuel primed into the combustion chamber, so we get a little bit quicker starting out of our engine. Then we have our cranking fuel. Once it continues to crank for, let's say, a few more seconds, this is going to be what it draws on for the injector pulse width under cranking conditions. So we're going to find these two tables play a role together to get the engine to crank, run, and fire. Too little fuel takes a lot of cranks to fire off. Too much fuel, we could flood it out, and then we have to go ahead and go full throttle to be able to clear out any of the fuel that's in the combustion chamber. I actually set up here, we're taking a look at our fuel TPS scale, anything above 60, actually anything above 80% throttle. Actually, no, anything at 100% throttle, it's going to zero out the injectors. So what we can do, and actually just set this up here, just set this all at 0, and then between 40 and 60. Yep, it goes from 100 to 50 to 0. So here at 60% throttle and higher, if we're finding that it seems to flood out and we want to go ahead and clear out the combustion chamber, we'll go ahead and just go full throttle. That'll do a flood clear option. So we have that set up and configured. So we're going to see how it cranks and it fires and it runs. That may or may not be something we have to adjust. These are the default values when we're discussing and talking about a stock K20 engine. This is the base map from EMU. This assumes we have stock injectors. We have 410cc injectors, so we might have to adjust our values here. We also may have to adjust our prime pulse. We'll see how it cranks and fires. If it cranks and fires and runs in, let's say, less than a second, then we have probably good fueling under cranking conditions, and we don't have to worry about that. Now, once we exceed 300 RPM, it kicks into the after start table. It considers the engine to be running, and then it also kicks into the warm-up enrichment table. Now, the after start enrichment is only applied for about 10-20 seconds. It's applied here for the after start duration time of 300 cycles or engine cycles. That equates to about 15-20 seconds of engine run time. So it decays away after a little bit of time, and then we're going to be in our warm-up enrichment, and this is going to be adding a percent.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.